We now have a baseball pennant race. At least that's what Dan Duquette and Buck Showalter and Peter Angelos have told us on Monday, as well as early controversies, early injuries out at Camp Purple in Owings Mills. Luke Jones is on the scene, both at Camden Yards and in Owings Mills, and he runs across this guy, as do I, in all sorts of places. Dave Ginsburg's been covering sports around here for the better part of 3.5 decades at the Associated Press. His work often shows up at WNST.net on our back pages and front pages on our morning newspaper. You can follow him at Ginsey and the number 3. He is also an author of a new book with Rick Dempsey that we've hit a couple of times here with some Orioles baseball, and Orioles baseball is the reason we bring you on, Gins. First off, welcome in. I know you've been chirping this week with DJ Durkin and Kaepernicking and Goodelling as well as Orioling, but I'm here for the Oriole baseball because I know that's probably where your first heart lies and a lot of your time lies, but this has been a very, very curious week in Oriole baseball, correct, Dave?
Well, no question about it. The old trade deadline, and, are you going to buy or are you going to sell? It's basically stock market time on July 31st.
I don't know how they measure this and have watched this pitching and watched this team and, watch sort of the malaise of a sub-500 team and knowing that there's not a lot of help on the way. And I know this comes from the old man. He wasn't going to fold up shop, and he wants Machado on the billboard next year. But, boy, this isn't a good long-term plan right now. And once again, and I know you've scratched your head and I've scratched my head and I've freed the birds, and you and I have had our back and forth about this for a quarter of a century, but dude, there's no plan here. If there really were a plan, Showalter and Duquette would be re-up by now.
Well, I don't know. The plan right now is short-term, and that's to see what happens this year. And Dan Duquette says we still think we can make the playoffs. The standings pretty much indicate as such if he wants backup. And basically, at the end of the day, yesterday, he said to me, we're not going to quit. And basically, to me, that's what it was about. They're not going to quit on this year, and I guess with a glimpse toward next year, but not too far into the future, as it were, or they'd have gotten rid of some of the guys that won't be around in 2 or 3 years.
It is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like when you have Britton hurt and not able to pitch. O'Day. Then, Tillman has very little value at this point. Machado may have brought back a king's ransom if he was batting .315 right now and you were out of it. But part of it is a lot of these guys have underperformed, which is why they're in the position they're in, which probably didn't help their trade value at the deadline, even though everyone sees Machado as a magical player. First off, the Orioles weren't willing to give him up for anything, and I don't know what the offer would have been from the Red Sox or the Yankees or elsewhere, places where you may have been able to go in and fleece the Yankees, as we saw back here in the 70s, which allowed a guy like Rick Dempsey to come here and you to write a book 40 years later, right?
Yeah, well put. You know what? I mean, here's the thing. Machado's going to be here next year, regardless. So if they feel by next July 31st that he's not going to be here long term, then that's when you deal him off to a team that really needs a hitter, and maybe a team like the Yankees or Red Sox that believe that once he's gotten a taste of playing in that city, he'll happily sign for the long term. The Orioles, I don't really see why they needed to get rid of Machado. Maybe he would have gotten some good trade value yesterday, but he'll certainly get it during this offseason. He'll certainly get it next July 31st. And he's, past the non-waiver deadline of next year. So I don't see that it was a priority to get rid of him. You're going to have him next year. At this point, you're going to have Britton next year. And why not see what happens next year if it doesn't unfold the way they want it to this year?
How are they going to get out of this pitching conundrum right now? And I don't know that Hellickson is the answer, but what are they going to sell me at FanFest this offseason that's going to say that they're really going to have legitimate Major League starting pitching in the American League East? Because I don't see it right now.
Well, what they're going to tell you is what they basically told you this year, that Dawson and Bundy are going to be the cornerstones of this rotation, and they won't have to pay Ubaldo his $10 million this year. That contract's going to be gone, as will he. And they hopefully bring in some quality arms to back up the two guys, Bundy and Gosman. If Gosman's pitching great right now, and Bundy, he's lost it a little bit, but that's mainly because he's pitching a lot more innings than he's ever done before. So what they're going to tell you is that we've got 2 of the 5 already filled in, and we're going to build around them. And we've got a great bullpen. These guys can get us to the 7th inning, then we'll be able to handle the rest. So that's what you're going to hear. And it's really not that false. They just need Gosman to start a little better and Bundy to finish better. And those 2 guys are 2 people you can build a rotation around.
Well, if they win 9 out of their next 14, as they've done in the last couple of weeks, that would put them at least at 500 or above 500. Do you think they're going to have a night where you go to the ballpark and cover a game in September where they're really going to be in a legitimate race?
Nestor, I honestly do not know, but I will say this, and there are going to be a lot of fans who will not agree with this, but I'm happy they did what they did because the next 2 months at least have some form of intrigue and interest to me. If they had gotten rid of all their stars, including Britain, then basically you've got 2 months of looking at baseball that is absolutely meaningless. At this point, the season still has meaning for the Orioles. There isn't a team that's running away with this thing. They're still in the East. They still can compete in the East. The Yankees have had their losing streaks, and so has Boston, which now dropped out of first. And the wild card teams in front of them, heck, half of them are under 500 or right there. So, I don't know. Will I be seeing meaningful baseball from the Orioles side in September? I don't know, but at least where we stand today, there is a chance of that happening. And for that, as a guy who's going to be seeing all those games in August and September, I am thankful.
Well, it's better than the hot dogs, I would say at this point. Dave Ginsburg, AP employee for 34 years. You can follow his journey out at the Associated Press as well as at Ginzy, Ginzy, and the number 3 on Twitter. And many do, and he's always bouncing around like we are from Camden Yards to Owings Mills to College Park and Annapolis and anywhere in between. His work does platform out at WNST.net on our backside of our AP stats page. Last thing on the Orioles, the long term for Duquette and Showalter and all of this, when do these things get addressed? I mean, we've seen what Scope has done this year. I would think that would be the most logical thing that would happen next is how do we buy a few years of his free agency right now? You don't want to get into a situation like you're in with Machado where it feels like it's lame duck.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. They went way past the wire with Chris Davis. And, turns out maybe that wasn't the wisest contract in the world, but you know what? They did sign him. They showed that they're willing to spend the money to keep a guy. With Adam Jones, he made it easy for him. With J.J. Hardy, he also made it easy. They solved those contracts before they had to. So the question is they've said they've had discussions already with Scope's representatives. So, to me, Jonathan Scope's the guy to keep. I think Machado might just be needing too much money to make a legitimate offer to. But Jonathan Scope, they should work on that as soon as they can. And if it does go past the wire, then so be it. I think they'll really make a hard effort to keep him. Right now, he's the best guy on the team, and that includes Machado. So, to me, that's someone that they need to address as soon as they can. And if they don't, well, that's the Oriole way. Sometimes they wait until they have to rather than when they should. But, I do believe that those 2 guys are certainly on their radar.
Yeah, I hear that you're in your car bouncing around, and hell, like I said, you could be anywhere, maybe headed to Owings Mills for all I know, and I don't know whether Colin Kaepernick's headed to Owings Mills or not, but this has certainly been a wide-ranging discussion over the last 5 days, and Goodell showing up, and look, you've been in the presence of Steve Bisciotti as many times as I have. He's dangerous with a microphone, and he's so honest, right? I mean, you're just always going to hear some sort of unvarnished piece of whatever's on his mind. Boy, that's a real juxtaposition to Peter down at the baseball place. But, from Sunday night, from him being a bystander to having fans asking him questions about this Kaepernick thing, feels like the whole organization is really getting questions about this, and it's brought up all the same societal, political, black, white, left, white, east, west, all that stuff that's going on. But the Ravens have found themselves in the middle of this because of Joe Flacco's backache.
Well, that's exactly right. And, Harbaugh, he was the one that brought it up initially, and he also tried to snuff it by saying, if Joe's back, if he's back on the field, then we really don't want to spend the salary cap space on Colin Kaepernick, who would basically be maybe second, maybe third string. They won't need him. It really does depend on Flacco's back. I'm not sure it depends so much on whether he stands or kneels during the, I will say, Star-Spangled Banner as opposed to Pledge of Allegiance, and you know what I'm talking about. But they haven't killed it yet, and they haven't really enhanced it, so it's more or less a holding pattern right now, and it will depend on how soon Flacco gets back on the field.
He is Dave Ginsburg, and he is one more stop that you've made here in August. I mean, not that we're mixing and mingling here. College Park for football. I know DJ Durkin had his presser earlier this week. Some thoughts about the Terps on the gridiron, and did you get a chance to see the new Cole Fieldhouse?
That will be unveiled tomorrow, and by the way, that presser was today, and I'm heading from that to Camden Yards, but he talked about they're going to start practice tomorrow, and he's talking about his second year being a little bit more comfortable than his first, and I probably would expect that to be so. Problem being, they opened the season at Texas, so welcome to your second year, Coach. It ain't going to be easy.
A lot of burnt orange going on there. I'll have to ask Justin Tucker about that when I get an opportunity. Again, it's always a pleasure to visit with you. Tell everybody about your book, how you're doing with the book, and obviously in a summer of Orioles tumult on the field, at least you got some nice stories to tell with Rick Dempsey.
Well, that was a great time. I'll tell you what, if the Orioles were doing better, maybe the sales would be better. I think they're doing very well because, Rick is truly a personality, and when they decided to write this book talking about the inside look at the Orioles, past and present, they picked the perfect guy, Rick Dempsey, and I'd like to think they picked almost the perfect guy to help tell his story, which would be me. It's real.